Theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Wrong reviews it all on Joy Drive.
Good afternoon, Suzy Wrong.
Hello, Warren. It's always such a privilege to be here with you and on the listeners on a Tuesday afternoon. You know, after watching this week's film, it just made me think how important it is to have some involvement with a sense of community, right? The way that you and I do.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I think it is so important to give back, and also, to create cohesion in that community, which we'll talk about a little bit more, because we're talking about the film RUSTIN, which is on Netflix at the moment. And I was just saying to someone here, Suzy, before, so they came in and they said, oh my goodness, I love Suzy Wrong. I'm going to listen. I listen all the time and I do all the homework and what have you. And we get a lot of feedback about you, Suzy, which is always positive. And I was saying to them, I said, do you know Suzy does this every week? And it's easy for us to go and watch the movie or whatever it is that we're watching. Sometimes, yes, it's, 8 hours of a series. But I said, Suzy goes away in her own time, volunteers her time, writes a review, which is something that I couldn't do. And your reviews are amazing. And it's all done as a volunteer, Suzy, which is absolutely amazing. And we thank you for it.
Yeah. You know, when you're doing it, it does feel like work. And, you know, sometimes when you're doing these things, you do feel how sort of difficult sometimes it is, especially when you're trying to find time between your usual stuff. But, you know, when I'm talking to people who have problems, like I have chats with friends who might be experiencing problems in their lives. And so often the answer is you just need to find something that's not about you for a moment, you know, and that usually takes the form of some kind of volunteer work where you're doing something just for other people. It's not about yourself, you know, just a few moments every week, and that's really, really healthy. And I think that relates really nicely with this week's film. Definitely.
The film we are talking about is RUSTIN, which you can stream on Netflix. Suzy, give it to us. What did you think of it?
The Great March on Washington in 1963 attracted an estimated 300,000 participants to advocate for the civil and economic rights of African Americans. The event is credited with helping to pass the seminal Civil Rights Act of 1964 in the USA. One of the main organizers of that great march was Bayard Rustin, a gay black man whose story from that key moment in history is told in the new Netflix biopic simply named Rustin. The 90-minute film is a refresher on one of the many important history lessons of the 60s, when civil rights took center stage and changed our lives for the better forever. This time, however, we are made aware of the very significant contribution of someone from our community whose gay identity has often been rendered invisible from so many of our memories of that crucial time and its key proponents. Bayard Rustin had worked tirelessly all his life for the advancement of human rights from his college days almost a century ago in the early 30s. We can only imagine the difficulties of living black in USA at the time, and adding to that, the injustices suffered by queer people so many years before Stonewall. The film Rustin urges us to consider all of those factors that have affected our hero's life, and by implication the countless others who navigate racism and homophobia simultaneously, whether decades ago or in our present day. I had wished for the film to be more powerful, more stirring, but it didn't really get very affecting until the last half hour or so. It is good, however, to see one of our queers from the past presented as a strong, intelligent figure and not just a victim in a constant state of trauma. Rustin is very beautifully shot. It's got an exceptional elegance that makes it all worthwhile. Some listeners will remember us talking about the director George C. Wolfe's previous film, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, also on Netflix, which I absolutely loved. Both films are exquisite from an aesthetics perspective, although this time around just a little less gripping as a work of drama. Warren, I know you're a fan of history, so I'm sure you enjoyed learning about one of the people whose shoulders that we stand on.
Yes, it's interesting because I don't know a lot about, I suppose, the civil rights movement in the US, but I loved learning about it. I love history. I find it absolutely fascinating. Suzy, I've got to say, watching the film, you know, you just mentioned before about a sense of community and, you feel privileged to be able to be involved in the community and contribute. I felt really lucky and privileged watching the film because I haven't experienced racism as a white man. I haven't. I've experienced discrimination as a gay man, but to have both and to see it portrayed in this film, it's just absolutely horrific. And if we look at, I mean, Coleman Domingo does an absolutely brilliant job as an actor in this film, but often, you know, we are lesser heroes, aren't we? We're overlooked because of our sexuality, and we don't get celebrated as heroes. And it's only until post the event and films like this are made that we find out who the real heroes are. What do you think?
Yeah, there's also the thing where people might have given Bayard his, due recognition, but they would have considered it inappropriate to talk about his sexuality, or they thought that it was irrelevant. But, you know, in a more modern time, we understand that actually it is highly relevant, especially to people within the community, because we need to be able to see ourselves achieve great things.
Yes.
You know, we are used to that part of our identity be wiped away when someone from our community achieves something great. You know, like you know, if in sport or whatever, they will often say that, oh, but it has nothing to do with their sexuality. That's got nothing to do with their gender. And then we don't know that, oh, they actually experience the same challenges that we do, and then they're able to achieve greatness, irregardless. So it's important for us to know that. And then also, it is also homophobia and transphobia that people don't want to acknowledge that part of heroes, you know.
And there's a sadness there, isn't there? Because how much of the achievement that occurs in day-to-day life is not celebrated because of who the person is? How much do we not see? How much is missed? I mean, this whole opportunity, we don't necessarily see it. There might be it might be a sporting hero who might be absolutely amazing. Maybe they're in the AFL, but they can't come out because of the culture there and say who they are. We don't get to celebrate that. We don't see that. We don't see those heroes.
Yeah. You know, I think it's important to say that Bayard Rustin was not a closeted gay man. I don't know whether it was out of choice or because he was arrested before, and then he was outed maybe, but he wasn't in the closet. So in the film, it appears that he was a fairly proud gay man, and but we just never knew that we had someone sort of so important in our queer history who existed all those years, who did so much work for so many years. So even though I think the film could have been a little bit more dramatic, I think it is just so important for us to know these things, you know.
Definitely. Something else that I took out of the film, Suzy, is, and I think this applies to our community as well, is that we can all splinter off into little factions and little groups. And, of course, that is what happened in the initial stages of the civil rights movement here in this movie. And I think this really can apply to us and something that we can learn from, in that, you know, for example, in this movie, 100,000 people would not have got together and marched if these groups had not come together in cohesion. And I feel like sometimes we do that. You know, we fight with each other. We don't like each other. And I'm not just talking about, say, for example, gay men within that gay men subset. I'm talking about the whole LGBTIQ plus rainbow. Often we don't like a certain letter in that rainbow. And in this movie, you look at it, unless we all come together, we will never get that greater power to achieve something.
Yeah, as people who suffer prejudice, it's important that we are very sort of aware, we are very sensitive to when we are doing our oppressors' work. Sometimes, you know, we take on the mode of behavior that our oppressors have, being like, I guess, just being very used to the way organizations are built or power structures are. We almost act like our oppressors do with one another. And you can see it in the film when they were almost wrestling for power, right? Trying to say who's right, whose methods are better, and then almost kind of had a breakdown in sort of the lead up to the march, but they were able to look beyond that and look at the big picture, which the film I think depicted very beautifully.
I feel like watching the film, I feel like Coleman Domingo certainly carried the film. I feel like if he wasn't there, perhaps it wouldn't, like you said, it wasn't as dramatic. I think he made the film, and I think his acting completed it. So well done. I mean, it was absolutely brilliant just watching his performance.
Yeah, he's great. And personally, I love all the camera and music stuff. I thought it was poetic almost, from a very mature filmmaker. It's a very beautifully made film. I couldn't keep my eyes off of it, although I did feel like, oh, why am I not sort of very emotionally invested? Yeah. But I guess in a way, it's good that you are kind of, engage from an intellectual perspective, right? Because it does make you think about how the story applies to now, how the story applies to our lives. And even though on the surface it looks like it's been such a long time, it's a different country, a different historical experience, but as we have proven in our discussion these few minutes, like it really feels very aligned with the things that we do, and the experiences that we have in the here and now.
And I think there is, of course, I mean, it is US history, isn't it? And for us, we are, I suppose, a little bit removed from it. So I did have that, there was that educational factor that we spoke about before that certainly I was enjoying with it. I didn't get so emotional in the film, so emotionally involved in the film, but I was very curious watching it, very curious. And I suppose the only emotion was that sadness about how we are big achievers. We can be, and we need to celebrate it, and we don't have to be swept under the carpet or hide our sexuality or whatever. We can achieve it, and we can be proud of it, and we should be celebrated for our achievements. It's not just straight people that should be celebrated for their achievements.
There's a key moment where Dr. Martin Luther King kind of very publicly declared how valuable Rustin was. Yeah, at a moment of scandal when the opposition was trying to take him down by exposing his criminal record and exposing him for being a homosexual. But he got the support from a person who was very clear-headed and who had a lot of integrity. And that was when I think the film really turned, right? It became very, very emotional all of a sudden, and you kind of went, oh, now it's really doing something for me. And also, I think the whole 60s was such a key moment in American history. It really has offered everywhere who's interested in activism a lot of blueprint, right, to study, a lot of ways of manipulating power, I guess, to get into discussions about activism, and about how we can represent marginalized communities because of the experience they had gone through and all the methods they have tried. So it is really good to see it again and to understand how we do activism today, how much it owes to that period. So I feel like it's such an important thing for us to understand, especially when we haven't had much education with American history in this country. How
confronting, Suzy, is the footage of the hatred towards some of the black Americans? You see some of that old footage of people just shouting, and you can see the hatred in their face. How shocking is that?
Yeah, it's very different, isn't it? To know conceptually, abstractly, like, oh, these things happened. There are people that do this. Once upon a time, lynching was a big thing. But when you see it, it just hits so powerfully. So, film and the visual medium is so important. So it's great that Netflix is able to bring a film like that to the world. Like, prior to Netflix, films like that kind of don't travel as far because they're considered American stories. But because Netflix is so incredibly international, like a lot of these things, we open our eyes for the first time, and a lot of queer stories are brought to places through people like Netflix, like companies like Netflix, places where they've never seen stories from queer people about queer people. So it is a sort of a quiet revolution that, obviously has its troubles and has its problems, but in terms of opening their eyes in this way about these important stories, I think it's wonderful.
I also was thinking about it too when they were, if you look at the Black Rights Movement in the US and you look at how they were all arguing with each other. I mean, I wonder, we saw a little bit of that, didn't we, with the recent referendum as well, all different sorts of opinions going on. And I wonder how much, what a difference would have made if there was a bit more cohesion there.
And also now with all the stuff happening in the Middle East, and it's also filtering down to everyone here, even though we are, most of us are quite removed from the action there. Like, not, I would say most of us don't have a lot of investment because we are not from a Jewish or a Muslim sort of heritage. But, we need to understand, we need to figure out a way to find cohesion and not let the violence kind of snowball. I see it becoming like a snowball situation. Like the fight is over there, but the way we are debating these issues and trying to understand these issues, it is so hard not to let the violence kind of transfer over here in how we think about these things and try to think about it with a peaceful mindset. It's all very challenging, but hopefully there is a good way to do these things. There's a right way to do these things, and I guess we can watch a film like that with a happy ending and kind of maybe have at least some optimism about these issues.
Suzy, message came in saying, I love the Suzy and Warren, see you next Tuesday.
Do you love that?
Oh, I love it, and I wonder how many people haven't picked up on it, so I love it. See you next Tuesday. Suzy, what is our homework for next week?
We're back on Netflix next week for the remarkable true story of athlete Diana Nyad, who at the age of 60 commits to achieving her lifelong dream, a 110-mile open ocean swim from Cuba to Florida. The film's title is simply Nyad, and I look forward to having a chat about it with you when I see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Suzy.